Welcome back to part 2 of session 1, setting the stage with LR9 9000. We are here with Jonathan, who is a creator of LR9K, and so far we've demonstrated its use with intersecting primitives. At this point we're working on the scene called Futuristic Laboratory. We've examined the LR9K settings and done a default render. We examined all the renders that it generated, the Tune to Tone pass, the main camera pass, which shows us the color IDs used, the main lines derived from the color IDs, the Fresnel V camera pass, and the Fresnel V camera line pass. We've tweaked the color IDs manually to give us better edge definition, and finally we tweaked the color IDs using Jonathan's script to give us this color ID pass. At this point we're going to start refining the line renders. So let's rejoin the session.
Since the difference in colors are now distinct, we can really lower the decision making on 3D Light to say be more liberal with the way that you draw lines. So let's do that and see if we get a better render based on what we have right now.
All right. So load up the script again.
Yep. Let's load up the script and select pass number 2, and then here we're going to change the line threshold, or is it called line threshold or edge threshold?
Are we looking at main camera, sorry?
Yep, main camera, pass number 2, and then the variable that's called line edge threshold. That variable is how different the colors need to be for the 3D Light engine to draw a line between them.
Oh.
So in our case, we can make that much, much smaller because all of our colors are very clearly distinct from one another now. So let's lower that to like 0.2 and see what we end up with.
All right. All right.
Okay.
Render.
Let's see what this looks like. Yep.
And I'm curious, save settings down here. What is that saving?
Save settings will allow you to save what you just did. So in our case, we changed the line edge threshold. So you can click Save Settings, but you don't have to click Render in order right away. If you wanted to go edit more things in your scene, you could go back to that and it would retain what you had, versus Cancel, which is lose your settings that you just played with.
And if I hit render, will it save the settings, or do I have to specifically say save the settings and then render?
It'll always save the settings if you click render.
Oh,
so.
Okay. Alrighty, let's bring that in. So we called it, won't be 2, it'll be Futuristic 1, 2, Camera Lines 2 was, it should be these two.
Yep.
And this can come down to here, and this can go up to there. And you want to look at lines first, or you want to look at, I guess, lines first?
Yeah, let's take a look at the lines first. The colors should be the exact same, so
wow,
we're only comparing the lines. All right, so now we're getting pretty good lines,
yeah,
I would say.
So a comparison between this one and the last one. So there's the last one, and here's the current one. A lot of extra detail.
Yep, much stronger lines in between the different colors. Now, we can strengthen that even more by lowering the threshold even more, and by changing the colors that are next to each other to be more contrast.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so this type of outlining might be good enough when we're talking about overlaying it on top of a the main color render. So let's take a look at this on top of the two-tone cam now and see what that looks like.
The two-tone cam was this one, the color one?
The very bottom.
Whatever.
Nope,
Oh,
very,
that's
very
right.
bottom.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The
Wow.
the quote-unquote regular render. Yeah. Okay, interesting.
Yeah. Wow.
All right. So it ended up making the edges pop a lot more, it looks like.
Yeah. Well, here it is without
Okay.
the line edges.
Yep. Big difference as far as like making it look distinct. Which this is actually kind of a cool tool to do when you're not making distinctly a cartoon type of render. You can certainly get interesting results and kind of making objects and characters pop by adding outlines in there. And it can you can certainly play with the opacity to give it a more subtle effect, but it ends up creating more contrast between the objects in your scene. All right. Let's take a look at the Fresnel lines in a little bit more detail and see what can be done with those.
Sorry.
So let's take a look at those on top of a white background.
Yep.
All right.
Well, there's a lot more detail in the ceiling than there is in the than there is in the camera lines, eh? Like a ton of more details.
All right. So here we're kind of dealing with a couple of things. Like the lines on the right side of the wall here have some spots that look a little bit weak. And then the lines on the back wall are hardly being shown. Now, depending on the effect that you're after, that might be fine. It might be somewhat challenging to find a happy medium setting where all the lines are coming out really, really nice. But let's take a look at what the Fresnel render looks like by itself and see where we can expect to get good lines. Yeah, so we can see that the back wall hardly has any sort of distinction.
Yeah.
So we're pretty much not going to get the back wall looking with detailed lines from this render, from the Fresnel reflected V camera. We can conclude that just because it's pretty much coming out all black.
Right.
The other lines are pretty serviceable, I think. So I think at this point what we can try to do is clean up the lines over on the right wall and clean up the lines on the mechanical equipment in the middle.
Okay.
Okay, so going back to those lines, it seems to me like the threshold for drawing a line needs to be a little bit smaller. And since we're dealing with a mechanical object in pretty clear-cut black and white, we should be able to bump it down a bit and have it be a little bit more liberal with drawing lines, and that might just give us better results. So let's give that a shot and see how that ends up.
All right. So we're going to go back to the script.
Yes, back to the script, and this time we're
Yeah.
going to turn off the main camera and turn on the Fresnel reflected V camera. Yep, and then down under line edge threshold, let's jog that down to 0.35 and see how that comes out.
Now this isn't using color IDs. Is there a reason for that?
Well, the Fresnel reflected V is going to ignore the surfaces for the most part of the scene. It's not going to be drawing the specular or the ambient or any of those colors. However, I do believe that it will honor the properties that affect kind of the quote-unquote geometry of the object. So things like displacement and bump maps, I'm expecting to come out on a Fresnel reflected V render. So the question is a question of performance and of detail. If you enable the use color ID materials, you can expect a perhaps faster render because it's going to ignore your bump maps and your displacement maps. However, you won't get that detail. So in our case, we can turn off render lights and render shadows because there's no need for it to calculate that because this is not taking into account lights or shadows. And we can turn on use color ID materials, although I'm not sure if those lines that we're looking at are geometric lines or if they're bump map lines. And if they're bump map lines, they're going to go away. So I think we leave it unchecked for the time being and see how this render comes out.
All right. Those Fresnel lines. You reflected 2. Is that 3? No, it should be...
Yeah, it should be Futuristic Lab 3.
This one here?
The ones at the bottom. Yep.
Both of them?
We only need the lines. The Fresnel
right.
render is not going to change.
So there's the previous, and here's the current. No, did I get that wrong?
Yeah, the reflected V lines are up above. You have 2 of them enabled currently.
Oh yeah, sorry.
So the 03 is the new one, and the yep. So turn off the camera lines for the moment. Let's just look at the Fresnel ones. Okay, yeah. So it does look like we did drastically strengthen the lines on the wall. They look a lot more clear.
Yes.
To me.
Yeah.
And then if we look at it in conjunction with the color ID lines, let's see how that looks together.
Main camera color ID.
The
Two-tone?
I think it's Futuristic Lab 03 main camera lines. I think it's the one right above. We could probably start getting rid of the old lines at some point now. But yeah. Okay. Yeah, so that together ends up being kind of the basis of our line image right now.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, so usually when I'm coming up with a line art image, the basis of my image are these 2 renders composited together. Now at this point, I'm going to keep tweaking these 2 settings until I get it pretty close to how I want it. So there's a couple of things that I would be looking at with this to make it a little bit better. I guess one would be, can I play with the Fresnel reflected V a little bit more to get better outlines on the walls? I bumped it down to 0.35 and that gave better results. So I guess I'm going to keep bumping it down until it starts giving worse results to see if I can get even better results than what we have here. So let's try another render, this time having it bumped down to 0.2 and see what we end up with.
This one here, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So that's what we have now.
All right. That's starting to look better, I think.
Yeah.
Looks like the lines on the wall got stronger. I had my doubts about those lines coming out at all, but it looks like we're starting to get pretty good results there.
Yeah, in fact, you know what? There's a lot of detail that came out. So if you take a look at the very first one, the progression is really interesting.
Now, one thing that you can do, of course, is if you get sort of okay lines with some settings and sort of okay lines with other settings using the same camera or multiple cameras. You can always composite them together in post. So in our case, everything that we've generated, since we haven't changed our camera angle, all of those can be kind of used to add detail to the scene in different ways in varying degrees.
Yeah. Now these two I love for I think they bring out everything.
Yep. So we could even go a little bit further, playing with the Fresnel some more if we wanted. We could try bumping down the threshold even more until it starts becoming very confused about where to draw lines, and we can see kind of how it starts looking terrible.
Okay. Let's see that. I'd like to see
We might
that.
get better results. All right, let's give it a shot. Let's bump it down to even lower than what we had. We had it at 0.2. Yeah, let's take it down to 0.1. That's fine. Let's see how that comes.
I think it's just awesome how you can bring the detail out from something that you can hardly even see with your eye, even in a decent render. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's definitely really cool when you can simplify the scene into its geometry, sort of, where, I mean, it's a color render, right? It's black and white, but it's a representative of the scene's geometry, and then you start getting really cool lines as a result.
So that's what we're getting. That's what we got in this particular render.
It looks pretty good, although now we're starting to get really thick lines. You see that? Like,
Yeah.
look at those pipes or the hoses in the wall, and then some
Yeah.
other places where we're starting to get
Yeah.
super thick lines where the there's just not enough contrast in the contour, you know. So I think I like it a step back from that. I think it's a little bit too thick for me.
Like this step back.
And yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, obviously it's a matter of taste, and you can do what you want when you're making the scene. But generally speaking, this is the way that I approach it. I start with some settings. I try to adjust the line edge threshold down to where I think it makes sense to be. It's giving me about the right level of detail before the outliner starts seeing it ambiguously and starts drawing really, really thick lines on all the gray it sees. And now there's another thing that we can do, of course, as well to try and improve this somewhat. So, still on the Fresnel lines, we can also bump up the line thickness and just have it draw more lines. Because, like, if we're looking at the lines that are on the back, what I'm expecting is that it's drawing a very, very, very thin line back there. So if we bumped up the line thickness, we also might get good lines. So now that we found a threshold that seems to be about right, I would say 0.2 or 0.25, we can bump up the line width a little bit. So let's try a 1.5 here. Realistically, we might actually want it to be more like smaller, but let's see how it looks with 1.5.
Now 1.5 is that a pixel reference or is that a
Yep.
yeah?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the size in pixels. Now, we should also note that this is going to start looking a little bit weird because now the Fresnel lines, which are kind of representing the detail lines of the scene,
Yeah.
are now even thicker than our outlines of the different objects, which is our color ID pass, right? So
Right.
that's kind of atypical for a normal kind of cartoon look, but let's see how this ends up turning out. We might like the look. I generally do go a little bit thicker on the outlines on the color ID pass lines
Yeah.
because I think it gives a better look with the thinner look on the Fresnel lines and the other detail lines in the scene.
So So that's this pass. This is the previous pass. Whoops, sorry. This pass, previous pass. It's not that much thicker. It's not. What do you think?
It appears to me like, sorry, I've got a bit of a lag here, so when you keep flipping back and forth, I'm not sure what the screen is showing me.
I'm so sorry. Yeah. So basically,
Okay,
what we're
so
on right now.
it looks to me like
this is the previous pass. Okay. And
Yep.
this is the current pass.
Yep. So it looks to me like lowering the threshold did more for us than improving the line thickness. However, the line thickness, line thickness. Looks like we're not getting crazy thick lines here. Okay, so at this point, now I kind of know my range of values, right? I know that
Okay.
I'm going to play with it between an edge threshold of about 2.5 down to 0.25 down to 0.1. And I know
Right.
my line thickness is probably going to stay at around 1, probably not that much bigger than 1, maybe 1.5.
Right.
Another thought would be that we could go smaller with the line thickness. We could go to like, say, 0.75 and then bump the threshold down more to see if we get better results as well. But the point is, it's a little bit of experimentation and playing on a scene-by-scene basis. You can get a pretty good start on what it looks like by doing what we did of jumping right to a slightly lower threshold and seeing what it looks like. And then I usually start with threshold until I get it seemingly right, and then I start playing with line thickness to get that more closer. But that's sort of the process around that. So right now, even with those two different renders, we could overlay them and we got pretty decent lines also.
Yeah, I mean, me personally, I think I like the previous render, this one here, with the main camera lines. The last one that we did here adds a bit of a punch to it that I like.
Are you talking about the extra thick lines and the?
No, this is so the Fresnel reflected lines. The previous Fresnel. And then the one that I just added was the main camera lines. These ones here are the main camera lines. Those ones there.
Yeah, you like that better. You like Fresnel 2 better than Fresnel 1? I thought Fresnel 1 looked a little bit better.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. I think I like the darker of the Fresnel 2 than the 1.
Okay.
It adds for the one thing that doesn't seem to have much detail, and I'm assuming it's just because of the map they used, was the console here. Because when you see it, if I turn the color, the two-tone camera on here, you can see, there's lines here, and there's lines here, and here, and there's one here, and I mean those are all map lines. I'm assuming that just doesn't translate into geometry differences. Is that right?
Maybe. Let's take a look at the Fresnel render by itself. That's usually what I use as a basis to see if there's geometric
differences
or not.
The Fresnel gray?
Yeah, the grayscale one.
Which is that one there, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, we can see that there are indeed some lines kind of in the midsection of it.
Right. Down along here.
That I think are, and I think those are getting picked up on.
Yeah, they are.
Mistaken.
Yep, they
It's
are.
the upper one, so the whole front-facing face to us is all black, which is why it's not drawing a line there.
Yes, Yes.
And then the side geometric edge, we should be getting lines for that too, aren't we? I mean, it's kind of a... No, we're not.
Hang on a second. Let me, nope, not here. This one here. That's what we're getting.
Yeah, so we're not getting super good lines there for that. So if I really wanted lines for that, I would maybe try one of the other cameras that came with line render to see if I get kind of a different angle, different grayscale output that has a better distinction between those two different planes. So, I mean, we could certainly try that if you'd like.
Sure. So let's just, for sake of argument's sake, let's just talk about the cameras that come with line render, because we've seen there's the Fresnel reflected, a black and white, which is, I think, turned off if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's not a camera actually.
Okay.
Maybe we take a look at that real quick and I'll explain what it is. If you don't mind, select the LR9K black and white object.
Yeah.
And then go to the parameters tab, please. Okay, so it looks like this node kind of isn't anything. There's no geometry associated with it, and then it has positioning information, which is kind of useless to us. There's a secret, and what this secret is that this node actually retains all the settings that are in the line render, the LR9K auto render dialog, and it remembers them. So when you load up your scene, the LR9K auto render dialog is pulling all of your saved scene settings from that particular object. Oh. So if you, for example, wanted to save your settings and load them into a different scene, you can save that object as a scene subset and then load it into a different scene. Along with the cameras, you'll need the cameras as well, but it becomes an easy way to kind of create a portable set of settings for all of your line render 9000 stuff. So if you start getting a particular style that you'd like, so you have a collection of cameras, you have your settings on your dialog, then you can save all of those into one preset that you can load into your other scenes.
Oh, that's great.
The secret here, why this doesn't look like it has anything, is because it actually has a hidden property. So if you, for example, click on the menu pane.
This one here?
In this, yep, that one.
Show hidden properties?
Yep, that's the one.
Okay.
So now you see how there's a settings option now?
Yeah.
Yep. So that little settings node, which is hidden, is actually the serialization of all the data and settings that's in the auto render dialog. So, I mean, if you wanted to break things, you could certainly open it up and mess with it in a text editor, or copy the text out of there and paste it into a new scene. So the world's your oyster, but I can't guarantee artistic results.
We don't want to break things as often as we do. It's working just great. I don't like to touch with it.
Yep, so that's the settings. So the LR9K black and white is the settings node. And then if we had loaded the color one, that would have been the same thing. So it's really just, you can think of it as all the properties that are on your dialog, and that's stored in your scene.
So the cameras that we're actually then using is the Fresnel reflected, the shadow opacity, the two-tone camera, the main camera, and there's one other camera that I think we're not using, which is the edge blend camera, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. And I think it's probably worth loading that guy up and seeing what we end up with. from
Yeah,
that
I
one.
like the results of the edge blend camera actually. It's a
All right.
so it's loaded into the scene now. I just double clicked on it over here, and it loaded, as you can see, down over here. So if we click
Mm-hmm.
on the L9RK auto render again, oh, it's not here. So I discovered that
Right.
you have to add the camera, and
Yep.
that
So we click add.
but it doesn't add the camera that you think it's adding. So you have to go to add which camera? I want the edge blend camera, and I don't want NVIDIA array.
Yep.
I want 3D Light Line Render 9000 camera,
Yes. 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 All
and
right.
I
And
want
we
to
will
enable
probably
it.
want to end. Mm-hmm. Are you saying that I should have better defaults? Is that what you're saying right now?
Oh, I
Oh
could never
boy.
write a script like this. I could never write a script like this.
All right. So let's disable the Fresnel reflected V, and start taking a look at the edge blend and what kind of outputs that gives us.
All right.
So on edge blend, let's see, what do we want to say? I think we can leave it as is for now and see what the main render looks like, and then we can start getting an idea of where we could get lines. Because if this doesn't look that much different than the Fresnel, then we might be barking up the wrong tree. So let's go
Yeah.
ahead and give this guy a render and see what it looks like.
All right. And you're right. This does look a lot like the Fresnel camera. I noticed when I did it. The one distinction was that I noticed it gave me, I think, better distinction in roofs. That you and I talked about this when we first met, was that I was trying to get shingles to show up, but I know they were just using a map for the shingles. They weren't actually modeling every single shingle, and you tweaked it enough to get me to see the shingles, which was awesome.
Yeah, let's see what it ends up looking like. Looks like it's a lot less dark.
Yeah, we got two maps. So this is the oh, I gotta click on it to bring them both in. So let me turn these ones off. So first one is this one here. There's the edge blend camera itself, and here are the edge blend lines. So
Okay.
yeah, certainly
Let's
certainly
go back.
a lot less dark.
Let's go back to the let's go back to the edge blend render, please.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So it looks like we're having somewhat similar problems to the Fresnel reflected V camera, where we are indeed seeing differences in color there on that edge, on the left edge,
Yep.
but they're
Over
not
here.
super strong, and all the other lines are way stronger in comparison.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this particular camera, does it make use? I'm just going to go back to Daz for a second. I just want to see what the default was. I think it has it does not have the edge. Oh, no, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong camera. It does have color ID option. Would it be worthwhile trying to turn that on?
That would be okay. I wouldn't expect different results there, because the edge blend isn't really, it's going to do the same thing like the Fresnel reflected V is, in that turning off the materials kind of doesn't matter, because it's not showing the colors of the materials anyway. It's not, and we don't really have bump maps and displacement maps that are coming into play here.
Right.
Let's actually take a peek at the properties of the edge blend camera in the Daz Studio main area. So let's cancel out of here and go to select the edge blend camera itself.
And parameters, yes.
Yep, and then go down to the edge blend section of the camera. So there's a couple of things we can play with here. Let's play with the attenuation a little bit and see what the render, if the render looks different. And actually in this case, maybe we want to, no, we want to still use the line render script. So yeah, so let's change attenuation down to a smaller number and see what kind of result we get.
How much smaller?
Let's go down to 1.
Okay.
All right, let's give this a render and see if our output looks much different.
Edge band lines 1 and 1.
It looks like it's a little bit lighter.
So there's the camera, yeah, it's lighter, and the lines are, let's put that one up above here. Here's the original. Oh yeah, definitely lighter. A lot lighter.
Yeah. So it's not doing too much for us on that leftmost plane, really.
No. What if we turn the attenuation up?
Yeah, if we do that, I'm expecting higher contrast, which I'm not sure if it's going to get us to a point where we're going to see a drastic difference, but we might. So I think let's do it, and for the sake of science.
Oops. 3.
Let's make it a 4.
Sure. Why not? Double it.
See how crazy it can be.
Alrighty, let's see what happened. It would be too darker, a lot darker, obviously. Too futuristic goes down to here. That one stays there. So there is the edge blend grayscale versus the last one. And the lines, the last time we did it versus now, a lot better.
It's got like a much stronger horizontal line presence. Like if you compare this to the Fresnel reflected V, the Fresnel reflected V had better lines on the right wall, and this one has better lines on the back wall. Like obviously we haven't tweaked the lines.
This
But, like,
one
if
is
you
the
go to
same.
the earlier
If
if you go back to the earlier Fresnel lines, we were always having difficulty with the back wall instead of the side wall.
Yeah. Edge blend lines too, but we got nope, wrong one.
Yep. So I'm not sure if we're going to get that line from the edge blend. However, we could theoretically get really nice lines on the back wall and composite that with the Fresnel to kind of have more even detailing throughout the whole scene rather than kind of lopsided how the Fresnel came out.
All right.
So I guess I would suggest leaving the attenuation where it is. I think that is fine.
Yeah.
And then I think we just need to lower our threshold down roughly to where the Fresnel reflected V's attenuation is, or sorry, the line threshold down to where the Fresnel's is, and line thickness as well.
All right.
So I think we're leaving line thickness at 1. So let's bump the edge threshold down to, what did we have, 0.25, and
Yep.
give that a whirl.
So the line threshold is the difference between one color sitting beside it, correct?
Yes. Yep, that's exactly right. It's yeah, when there's two colors next to each other, are they different enough? It's if the renderer thinks they're different enough, it's going to draw a line. So that's a measure of how different the colors have to be for a line to be drawn.
Oh, look at the difference. Big difference. That's the previous one. That's this one.
Yeah. All right.
A lot of detail on the back wall. And if you, oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's looking pretty good.
And if you bring
So
in
let's
the,
overlap that with the Fresnel, yeah.
so the Fresnel, the last one we did was this one.
Yeah, I think you were liking the 2 though, right?
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
Or no, you did like 3.
I was liking the 2. You like 3. Yeah. And I also like main camera lines, which was
Yep.
this was the last one that we used because it outlines, it gives distinction to the 2 video monitors at the back of the room,
Yep.
and it also draws this really thin line that's at across the front of the console, and it's the only one that's done that so far.
Yep.
But the
And
but
we
the
can
rest
get that one looking. Yep.
but the rest of them detail the lights. I mean, the fixtures, before I could never see the fixtures at all. And I don't think the roof, if it's ceiling, I'm just going to turn these off for a second. Yeah, the ceiling isn't reflected in the main camera lines at all. So they've only come through in the edge blend and the reflected lines.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you add the two-tone camera, I really love that. And if you converted that into a grayscale, black and white. Okay, I could play with this, but I'm not going to because it's fine. I can turn this off. This will off. So that ends up being a pretty darn interesting black and white background for a comic.
Yeah, one of the things that's interesting about using 3D as the basis, and that's pretty reflected in the in the futuristic scene that was picked, is that the floor is very reflective and we're getting very realistic reflections from the scene. So even if we did do simplification of the scenes, the materials in the scene, you can have surfaces cast reflections. You can have shadows also calculated and start getting very realistic results, which creates, in some cases, a very interesting combination of the two, of having kind of almost a hand-drawn style, which is sort of what we're trying to emulate, but also very precise things like the reflections and shadows that you can get a computer to calculate for you.
Yeah. Well, I think it looks spectacular.
Right. And the idea for how line render would end up fitting into a workflow for that is, once you kind of have developed your style, like we've sort of developed a style based on the cameras and the settings that we've picked, you can group those all up and just load them into a new scene of your choice, and then you're really close to having similar results. I mean, you still have to set your color IDs, but it starts getting you really close to being able to turn an existing scene into kind of a line art representation or a cartoon representation. And that's actually one of the rationales behind line render, is to try and leave as much of the original scene untouched. So, because I'm interested in doing the more photorealistic rendering as well as doing cell shaded styles as well. So I wanted a mechanism that was non-destructive where I can do both within the same scene without having to save a copy and evolve one differently than the other. I can keep one scene that can have realistic textures, but also have cartoon setting, so to speak. And that's sort of the reason why everything is in cameras that simplify the scene, and extra files that get outputted from the rendering engine. There's no need to override every object in your scene to have it be a different surface, different texture, although you certainly can do that to get more cartoony results, but you don't have to with line render.
When I realized what you were doing with Color ID, that you were basically adding an additional parameter that it's a non-destructive parameter that doesn't harm the original product, it became, wow, I don't mind doing this now. This is really, really useful.
Yeah, that's a lot of the intention, is to try and do things in a non-destructive way, and so that's why the settings are a separate object that can be saved out independently, and then the cameras all are separate, so you can kind of pick and choose the things in it. And with that power comes a lot of complexity. There's just so many different ways you can mix and match what there is that it becomes very, very difficult to write a simple tutorial or a simple readme of like, here's how you make good cartoon art, because it's a little bit more than that. It's a big change in the way that one thinks about approaching the art, where the way I think about it is first I deconstruct the scene and then I kind of reassemble it later in an artistic way again. But it's looking at things from a single perspective, like in this example, we looked at it from the perspective of what does the geometry show, and where can we expect to get lines, and what are the different objects in our scenes, and where do we want lines between those objects or those materials. And it's the same thing with all of the different aspects, where we could continue to tweak the main render a bit more to get the color clamping better, and we could do something with shadows and lighting to get shadows interesting. But instead of looking at the image in a holistic way and try to get the art perfect on one-click render, it's really thinking about it with regards to its individual components, of getting multiple line passes that, when overlaid together, start looking like convincing line work.
Well, I certainly think what I'm looking at on my screen right now looks like convincing line work.
I'm glad you think so. I think it was a pretty good result for a couple minutes.
Yeah. So I have one question left, and then we're going to shut this down, and we'll go on to the next episode. If I wanted to save the settings, let's assume I'm happy with the settings that I've got right now. How would I save those settings?
Sure.
So we're going to go back to DAZ.
All right. Once you're in DAZ Studio, then go up to the File menu and then select Save As. One of the options underneath Save As should be Scene Subset.
Yep.
So once you've selected that, maybe we want to put this in a preset folder, but nevertheless, you can give it a name. So maybe we want to call this Futuristic Lab LR9K settings or something.
Yep. Oops. Yep.
All right, and now let's press save, and now it should prompt us for what objects out of our scene we want to save. So here we would uncheck our futuristic laboratory, and we would keep everything else, I think, because we want to keep our wide angle camera, because that's the main camera in our settings. We probably don't actually need the composite cam, so we could take that guy out.
Yep.
Like that, and now we can just say accept. And now at any point after we've loaded a different scene, we can find that preset that we saved, double click it, and it's going to load all the cameras that we have in our scene plus the settings node, that LR9K black and white as it's called. Of course, you could rename it to call it your, Sean settings or whatever.
Yep. LR9K settings, don't touch. Don't delete it, don't tweak.
You got it.
Well, that's fantastic. I think you got a great plug-in there. I think that it's hugely misunderstood, and I hope that the tutorial helps everybody understand it. And I want to really, really thank your time, Jonathan, for thinking about this and walking me through it and walking other people through it, because there's a lot of people out there that use DAZ Studio for graphic cards or comic books and aspire to be great artists and maybe don't know how good this product is and how useful it is. Really, it's
I'm really happy to hear that you like it, and it was definitely a lot of work, but work that I'm happy I ended up doing. So looking forward to the next episodes where we can talk about some of the more advanced topics and take the next steps.
Yep, me too. So I want to thank everybody for watching, and look forward to seeing you in episode 2, where we tackle a human figure with transparency maps, and try and tweak that to get it to look cartoony, if you will. Thanks very much, everybody. Goodbye, and thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks.